This is the Convene podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Convene Talk. Barbara, can you share more about today's topic?
Yes, today's topic is about the return of BookCon, which is returning in a year, which I thought was pretty appropriate to the pace of book reading. Like, I'm so excited. BookCon is coming back in a year. But I found it really interesting because of kind of the history of conferences and what this illustrates about that. Book Expo was the very first iteration of a booksellers conference, and it had a different name when it was founded in 1947. But it was the place where everybody went. The librarians went, people who owned bookstores, publishing companies, everybody went to, like, finalize their list for the next year, to find new vendors, to find, distribution, and it was huge. And it rotated around different cities in the US, but it had a big international audience. And then in, I think, 2014, BookCon joined Book Expo because Book Expo got smaller and smaller, and BookCon was a way to kind of open it up to consumers. And it really caught my eye because I did go to Book Expo when I lived in New York, and it was a Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory experience for me. I mean, Javits is a huge convention center, and it was filled with books and booksellers. And it also had started to have that the consumer-facing parts of it. BookCon wasn't officially part of it, I don't think, when I went, but there were lots of panels, there were celebrities, and when I read the announcement in Publishers Weekly about how it's being reinvented, I thought it just said a lot of things, both about what's going on kinda culturally right now and also what's going on in the industry, because they're just really reimagining BookCon and having a lot of community features. The ones that caught my eye was book clubs, place for book clubs to meet. There were crafting. I'm sure did that catch your eye? Crafting sections where maybe you could crochet and talk about books. But I also, when I was talking to Amani Ellis, who spoke at EduCon, we talked a little bit about the reemergence of offline spaces, which are things like book clubs and record listening clubs, and I feel and those are really proliferating, and it seems like BookCon and the story about it talked about how BookCon was a way to really meld the virtual world of, like, Book Talk and all the online book selling with the physical real world. And it just seemed like a way for people to get back together, just person to person with embodied objects like books. So I just thought it was exciting. And I'd love to know what you guys thought when you read that. Michelle.
The first thing I thought of is that my very first convention was the American Library Association Book Fair. That was my very first, and it was in the dark ages, and it was when I was a book editor. And the big topic of discussion at that time was whether people would still continue to read books because movies had just come out on video. And there was like well, why are people going to buy books when they can just sit home and watch movies for the first time ever? And so that just ages me, but it brought me back to that conversation. I mean, that point in time. And now looking at this, I just think, wow, young people read books. They love books enough that they would reinvigorate this expo. So that makes me feel happy just to think that all those years ago, books proved everybody wrong, and they continue to be something that people share and talk about and continue to buy and rent from the library, whatever.
Barbara, I felt like the article resonated in the same way for me. When I started reading it, my first immediate thought was, I love that they're bringing this back. I feel like books have had a resurgence, like you said, culturally, in that you, at least me, I feel like other people have noticed this too. Book clubs are like the new club. I feel like my fellow millennials will get that. But, like, basically, you know, I feel like you said, it's like the new gathering space. I'm hosting a book club in a month. We talked about that when we saw each other a couple weeks ago. But in book talk is huge. I feel like there's just a whole new group of people who are interested in books, and they're sharing it in ways that maybe didn't exist previously. I mean, I know book clubs have been around for a long time, but w it seems like they're sharing it a lot more online, which is so ironic, you know? Like, they're talking about their book clubs and their IRL gatherings online, but I think it serves as a great tool to bring people together regardless of where it is. I'm super excited to see how this event taps into that community and potentially uses influencers for its own benefit. I think that's really interesting, and I think more and more events are doing that. I sat in on a webinar a couple weeks ago that talked about how B2B influencers are becoming more of a tool for events like this. So I'm very curious to see what happens. Kate, what's on your mind?
Yes, I wanted to just add some context for what everyone has been saying, which is this is partly about people missing coming together and wanting to reoccupy that third space. And it's partly about how different demographics of the population are reading. As a millennial, I absolutely love digital books. But Gen Z feels the opposite. That generation has a strong preference for having a physical book they can hold, even if they're going to make a TikTok about it. And so I think that the resurgence of these in-person events with new community elements reflects a return to legacy media. And I'm not even sure it's limited to books. We're also seeing an increase in people buying CDs and people buying DVDs. Who knows what other meetings might come back?
Yeah, well, it's just so interesting that you talk about physical books and ebooks because I, at long last, have come around to both. Like, when I read my book for I'm in a book club, and the book that I read, I get it in an ebook, and that way I've got it with me. Like, I finished one of the books for my book club while I was delayed in an airport, and it was just I mean, I could have carried the book, but it's just like you can always have that with you if it's on your phone. But I want the book too. I wanna see how they designed it. I mean, there's so much information and, like, how do they what's on the cover? What kinda type do they use? It just feels good. And so I think that when people like, going back to Michelle, when you talked about, will people stop reading books because they're watching movies? The answer is, like, all of it, all of it. We're not gonna leave the good stuff behind. When I was reading a little bit about the history of BookCon, it said the first time they did it in Javits, it was a disaster because they did not anticipate the crowds. That they had huge lines, they had problems with getting people in, and I just thought that's like a little footnote that they just didn't know how popular it would be.
When you speak about the design of books, it just reminded me I got a gift earlier this year, I got Alice in Wonderland, but it was a special copy with illustrations by Dali. And I was like, oh, I did not know he was illustrating books, but apparently he just did a few copies and it's a very special issue. So I was like, whoa, very cool. I love that gift. But, just bringing it back to events,
Yeah.
speaking about this event made me think more of how they're engaging the younger generation, and they're bringing back an event with the intention of attracting young people. So I'm thinking that would be a great example for our industry because we're struggling so much attracting the younger generation and engaging them. And I love the fact that they're capturing book talk and all the other social media variations and how social media currently made book authors, celebrities, and how the young are eager to interact all kinds of books. I have a friend so she's buying the ebook. I guess she's getting also the physical just because of the love of physical, but she also has an option that she gets it as an audiobook as well. But everything syncs. And I'm like, okay, that's a bit too much. Can you just get one option, just read from that? But I get it. I mean, it's just a different way of consuming the same thing, which I really loved. And I would love next year that we dive deeper into this example and get good ideas from them.
It reminds me that for a while, Convening Leaders had a book club. There was a special book club that they organized it so they all read the same book in advance, and then they met on site. And I don't know how they decided on the book that they were going to read, whether it was completely, had nothing to do with the events industry or whether it was specific to the events industry. But I think that would be a fun thing to add, a simple thing to add to conferences, just to create a book club and let the community develop that online and give them a chance to meet somewhere on site.
I think that's a great idea. You might be familiar, those of us in the US, with one city, one book. Like New York did it. They would choose one book that was specific to the city's history. And I know that San Francisco does that as well. We could have one conference, one book. That would be fun. And I was just thinking, we used to write, we had a tradition of writing about books in December, like when you're curling up with a book, thinking maybe it's time for Convene to have a book club. There's a young woman named Jillian Cardinal, and she, during the pandemic, brought people together around a book club that she organized. And it is just a great way to build community. It's like another way that ideas are shared among people.
Barbara, I nominate you to officially start the Convene book club. You would be a
Well,
great book club leader.
my siblings did tease me and call me Barbara Bookworm, to my great irritation. So,
What would be your pick if we did this today? What would be
well,
your first pick for everyone to
oh
read?
gosh. I mean, like what my mind goes immediately back to is Priya Parker.
I knew you were going to
Book,
say that.
which is like such a good book, and I did not encounter that in the meeting space. I encountered it because I followed on Twitter book
Mhm.
publicist. And so I heard Priya Parker speak at the Strand bookstore in New York. And it was like, probably 60 people that came to hear her talk. But I feel like I'm sure there are really lots of great books. I like the ones that are just a little bit adjacent.
Mhm.
They're not really about events specifically. Like Priya is like, she's really good at bringing groups together. Her background is as a conflict negotiator.
Mhm.
So that's what her expertise is, in bringing groups together. So she's thought really deeply about who should be in the room. How can I get them to talk to each other? What makes them show up? And so I think those places where people have deep expertise in one aspect of what events are would make great The other book that popped into my mind is Design for Belonging by Susie Witt, who teaches at the Stanford Design School. And it's just how do you design groups so that they feel like they belong? And that is a short read. Like that's a little tiny, very graphic book.
Those are good
Does
ones.
anybody else have any ideas?
I am still reading this because I'm really bad about starting books and getting distracted. Mine would be this book. I'm almost there. I wrote about it, I think, like a year ago in like one of the trends pieces that we did, but it's The New Tourist by
Oh,
Paige
yes.
McClanahan. And it talks about the good and bad effects of travel and tourism on people and places and things. And I like it because it talks about that honestly, but it also talks about how we can improve upon it, how to fix over tourism, and why tourism and travel is still good. That's why I like it. I like her take because it's not doom and gloom. It's let's have an honest conversation about how to fix some of these ill effects. That would be my pick.
I love to read, but I think since started working here, I have limited my reading because I read all day long online. So I like to listen to books now so I can multitask. And I'm listening to Malcolm Gladwell's new book called Revenge of the Tipping Point. And I remember reading The Tipping Point, and he wrote that 20, I think he wrote it 25 years ago. And I just love how he's circling back and looking at how he wrote as a much younger person and examining some of the conclusions he drew when he wrote that book and how he's just rethinking them. So, yeah, that would be my pick. And Barbara, I used to get punished for reading instead of going outside and playing. So I can relate to you as a child.
Same. And didn't that make it seem all the more
Oh, yes. Yeah.
attractive?
Yeah. I would
Yes.
sneak it in at night. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun. Well, I think we hit a vein.
Let's start the question. I'll post it in our other channels and see how many people are interested in joining our book club, if we had one.
If we had one.
I like that
Wonderful.
idea.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Book clubs are very, very in right now. Everybody belongs to a book club, it seems.
Well, you know what? It's also just not about the book. I was complaining to my daughter about, like, I'm fairly new in the Bay Area, and I was saying it's hard to find a book club. And she said, well, why don't you and your friend start one? And it's a friend that's been here a while, and so I had my few friends, and some of her many friends came together in this book club, and it's not just about talk. It's like how you get to know each other through talking about the book. And it's been really nice to see how my friends and her friends, like, now we're all friends. And it's just it's a really good tool for connection.
That would be perfect for first timers joining an event. Just to give them one more opportunity, one more common topic to break the ice, to find a connection. So yeah, maybe we're onto something.
I think we are.
Well, thank you all for the awesome discussion. Remember to subscribe to the Convene podcast on your favorite listening platform to stay updated with our latest episodes. For further industry insights from the Convene team, head over to pcma.org/convene. My name is Maggie. Stay inspired, keep inspiring, and until next time.